Thanks everybody, this was fun, especially circulating in the groups. Everybody had a lot of great questions. So just to kind of go through the scenarios and we'll discuss them. And I think just to share with you, there are answers that are better than others. There really are no right or wrong answers per se, because depending on what the person's contributing, it depends. So the first scenario, we have an engineer has a lab where students build specialized electrical devices. You need a special device that is not currently available. What type of agreement would you use to, so what type of agreement would you use to divide the special device? So let's say I've already kind of mapped it out. I know exactly what I need. I have a friend who is in this scenario, a rocket scientist. I tell my rocket scientist friend that I need this box. I need it to do A, B, and C. We meet, we talk about it, we have some phone calls, he develops the box, and he brings me a prototype for the box. In that scenario, he could be working as a collaborator. And also, too, he could also be working as a consultant. If he's doing it in an academic fashion, then he could be either. Where it might start to tip a little bit is when we look at the criteria. Is he having input? Am I just telling him what I need and he does what I ask him to do? Or is he telling me, no, Valerie, here's what we should do? Or here's what I would suggest. So he's actually working with me to design the box. We're having meetings, we're talking in a collaborative fashion, and he's contributing to the science. I know what I want something to do, but I don't know how to achieve it myself. So in that, we're collaborating together. So in that scenario, he's a collaborator. And I probably want to cover his effort. But again, if he's just building something for me because he's better at it than I am, then he makes the difference. Probably what he's not is he's probably not a vendor. If he works for an academic institution, when we were talking about the criteria for subcontracts, he's not doing it as his primary business. He's actually an academic. So he would tend to probably slant more towards a consultant than a vendor. Usually vendors we think about as someone that's their primary business or they provide it. So this person that I'm working with, my rocket scientist friend, he's going to help, we're going to work together, and or else he's going to work alone with the students to publish a paper on the development. Well, this may further cement the concept that he's a collaborator because he's academically in there. I mean, he's knee deep in there. He's thinking about it in a scholarly fashion, and he's putting together the paper. That being said, not everybody that you publish paper with is a subcontract. They may be a collaborator, but for contractual purposes, they could just be a consultant. So I publish a paper on this wonderful device. I credit or I get input. I put his name on my paper because my consultant friend built something for me and I want to credit his work. So just because he's on a publication doesn't mean that he's not a consultant. It just means that he's participating in the paper. So again, it depends on what the relationship is. Fabricating a device, if he's a collaborator, he can still be a collaborator, and I'll cover 10% of his effort or 15% of his effort. If his group is going to make the box, we can have a separate agreement to pay them for each piece of the box. Or I can pay for effort for his students to create the boxes for me. Now, in this scenario, which is taken from a real-life example, we took a bid for another groups to look and see if they could fabricate the box because it would probably be more time efficient, probably more cost efficient in the long run. So we took bids and found someone to put it that is their primary business. So in the development of the box, we had a collaborator who worked with us on where to place the magnets and what should work. And then we paid somebody to make the box, and they were a vendor. They weren't a consultant, they were a vendor, because they were providing us with a service. We said, here's what this is, here's the specifications, make a bunch. In that scenario, they're a vendor. And then, same thing, review the application of the device. If they want to see how the device works, they're looking to make sure it works, that we're using it the right way. Again, maybe our vendor could do that, maybe a consultant can do that, maybe our collaborator is doing that. So depending on how deep they are into the weeds with that, they can have both roles. And QA on the device, the same thing. I can hire someone to test to make sure that no one's going to get zapped by my little electrical box. Or maybe the vendor, the collaborator looks at that and takes a couple of samples of the test that is part of our agreement. So it can be both. Again, it matters the amount of input. You know, if their expertise, yeah, you could probably find yourself another rocket scientist. But in this scenario, this rocket scientist is providing something that you couldn't get, maybe not from another rocket scientist, but you could, you know, it'd be hard for you to find that same amount of expertise. So in that scenario, they're a collaborator. Do we have any questions? The ancillary study. You're interested in collecting biomarker samples as an ancillary study to a currently funded trial. What items do you need to consider in creating a budget for yourself? And I like to call this now, everybody kind of, you know, now that we have all these studies going, we have so many ancillary considerations for people with test tubes. Because there's so much interest in biomarkers, especially when you think about how certain drugs work, depending on your genotype. So if we're thinking about for an ancillary study, what a couple items do we have? So Will, can you, is your item, does your group have like at least an item? Item or two?
We did have at least an item. One was these things are analytically like really hard, so we wanted a lot of a biostatistician.
Okay, that's a good thought. Dr. Selzman, what about your group?
We want to have a place to store our samples.
Okay. Do you have a couple other items? Why don't you go through your list and we'll have other groups add to it. How's that? That might be the most efficient.
Sure, sounds good. We had a few. We wanted obviously some money for the lab, some money for the person that's going to collect the specimen, the statistical analysis as a roles group as well, sample storage. We wanted to have money for the patients, money for the coordinator, money for the lab. Let's see, for the PI for shipping the samples. That's all we have.
Does anybody have any other items that they want to add to that list?
Emphasis.
An emphasis?
The supplies.
Nice. Yeah, the test tubes aren't long, they aren't raining in the sky.
We also had the idea that if you needed to maintain temperature control for the shipping device, you might need, or the samples, you might need a device in there to ensure that it was cool the whole time. I think the other thing we sort of distinguished between PI effort, central project manager effort, and effort in terms of per patient, costs at each of the sites. If it was a multi-center trial, there would be work involved for the people who are doing the enrollment and follow-up visits. So we had that kind of separated out there too.
So no, those are great. Anyone else?
There was something else where someone brought up possible IRB fees.
Nice. Yeah, and that's a great point. For federally funded studies, a lot of institutions will waive IRB fees. But sometimes if you're using now some of the independent ones like Western IRB, you may have a charge for them and you may have a charge for amendments. So no, that's a great item. And sometimes the IRB fees, just to share for our ancillary studies, we include IRB fees in our startup costs. So, thinking about besides putting the samples, you want to pay people to start up, right? So you want to give them a little bit of money to get somebody on there to help screen for eligible subjects. Because that kind of tees back into our conversation about multitasking with coordinator. If I have a primary study, my coordinator may not have time to screen for all the criteria for your ancillary study. Many times they can. But a lot of times they won't. They might have different activities. There might be some labs that are associated. For example, your blood study makes the people who are coagulopathic, where my study does it. So, I don't care about coordinators as much as you do, so our coordinator's not going to spend any time with them. Sometimes too, shipping consideration, you might have special shipping considerations if you send it to an outside lab. If you're just tossing it in your freezer and your lab is going to process all the samples, it's okay. But if you're using a central repository or a central processing group, you have to ship your samples. Now there's all these criteria because of all the people that are like at airports with these steaming boxes of blood that are getting lost. So a lot of times you can only ship on certain days, and there's higher levels of scrutiny for shipping biosamples. Sometimes people in your lab need to be trained to run biosamples. A couple other things too, we want to think about processing when you think about coordinator time, when you kind of step out the things you want to ask yourself. For example, is this a blood sample where You know, if I'm coming by and I'm from the lab, I can put it in my pocket for an hour, and then I can just drop it off to the lab with my normal lab run. Whereas this is a sample that is so sensitive that someone has to immediately run it to a centrifuge. It has to be spun within a certain amount of time, and then it has to be frozen within a certain amount of time. Because there, you might need more coordinator effort. So it's not just so much picking out, yes, I need a coordinator, but what's all involved in running that sample. Sometimes in addition to your lab fees, they aren't just processing or freezing. Some institutions, someone from the lab has to pull a sample. Sometimes coordinators aren't allowed to pull samples or do blood draws. So you may have extra fees there. So sometimes the expertise. Oh, yeah, and ancillary studies are especially with drawing blood.
I have one that, so this is from experience multiple times, right? If this is a biospecimen that's going to be measured with an assay, you need to budget for the cost of combining that assay data from the external vendor into the study database for the analyses that you want to do, because that is inevitably never considered in the budget, and then the DCC is just expected to just magically make it happen.
Yeah, and then the other part too about storage is you may have a 5-year study, and you're going to be collecting it, and then you're going to run analysis, but what do you do with those samples after you're done? Do you need to pay to have them destroyed? Are you required to biobank them for a certain amount of time? So other people, if they develop a new assay, can run a new test that hasn't been developed at a later time. You don't have to kind of think about that, but now some of this things with biobanking and specimen handling is kind of sneaking in. So. All right. No, thank you for adding that. That's a good one. Okay, multi-center clinical trial. So you have 11 sites that will participate in various capacities. One is your institution, providing the oversight, you're the coordinating center. You have 2 leads investigators that will oversee the trial and work with you collaboratively. One is a data center, and one and 700 sites of enrolling patients. So you have different people doing different activities. So in the interest of time, we'll just kind of run through the models. You know, when you talk about each one of those groups, you want to ask yourself, does a relationship meet all 5 criteria? So for your lead investigators who are directing that and seeing patients, maybe. Is this service something they do when they're in the primary parts of the business? Probably not. They're not a business, they're investigators, so either a consultant or a hybrid. And then the sites that are enrolling subjects, you know, are they true collaborators as far as the subcontract goes, or are they working as a sub-agreement? So kind of working through the activities, you know, when you kind of put them through the algorithm, the 2 institutions with lead investigators, if they're contributing, sometimes they're just overseeing the steering committee board. That may not be enough, but generally if they're that involved with your study and they're that engaged, usually they are lead investigators. If you have people that are just, you know, putting together meetings or, you know, participating, but in this scenario, they're a little bit more involved than just someone who's consulting on study operations. Your data center independence, in this scenario, they're considered a CRO. But a lot of times your data centers are. With a lot of our multi-center networks, our biostatisticians and our data coordinating centers are actually true collaborators. In that sense, they have a subcontract to do the work because they're actually input on study design, data collection, data analyses. So they're not providing it. It's not part of their business plan. So if you're working with a group, then I'll just use Statco or Quintiles or some of the larger CROs that are out there that provide the service. They may be a vendor agreement or a purchase service award. But other academic institutions that are more collaborative and have it as a collaborative mission, they would be a subcontract. So in this scenario, they're purchase service agreement. So again, just because they're the data collecting doesn't mean that they're automatically a purchase service agreement. It depends again what the role is and how deep they're involved in the process of the study development. Now the 7 enrolling sites, you know, as we noted there, the 2 of the investigators, they were also seeing patients and enrolling subjects. So they have 7 hybrid agreements. And actually, you can have someone who is a collaborator on a study and performing one activity, and then if they're seeing patients, they can also do that. A lot of times, what you can't have is you can't have someone who's acting as a consultant and a collaborator on the same study. So I can't, for example, provide 10% of your effort to do work, and then, well, I'm going to pay you a little bit more, so I'm going to put you as a consultant too. That's not allowed. But if you're enrolling subjects, you can have a separate agreement for the per subject payments, and then you can have an agreement that is for their effort, for the work they're doing outside of seeing subjects. So usually it's not very common that you have two separate agreements, but there are scenarios where you can. But again, you can't pay someone who is consultant. And we were like, why would someone do that, right? Like you give them a subcontract. Why would you not do that? It matters how much effort they have. So if someone is capped at the amount of available effort they have a restriction where their research effort can't go above 50%, but they're doing so much work that they need more effort, you can't circumvent that cap on the effort by providing a consultant payment. It's completely not allowed. But there are some scenarios we could get more than